So what is Heroku? I don't have any fancy slides or anything for this presentation, mostly because I intend for it to be mostly demonstrative. I want to show you the process, show you the ropes, rather than trying to talk in kind of an abstract sense about it. The one thing I might diverge or into is kind of just like showing some websites, showing some resources that I find particularly helpful. So I might stop over on the 12-factor app page website and just kind of stay there for a while just because of how kind of important it is to Heroku. But in general, so like what is Heroku? And what do I think of when I think of what Heroku is? Heroku is a cloud environment, much like many other common services like AWS or Google Apps Engine or Azure. But the thing that makes Heroku distinct and still unique is that they strive to make it a lot easier and not so difficult to use. And so that the whole infrastructure of it is more in terms of a platform rather than just directly working with kind of bare metal resources. They make it a lot easier and kind of almost Salesforce-like in the way that it makes it a little bit more declarative. So one of the things I wanted to do in this demonstration is I wanted to kind of compare and contrast some of the ways that I've found works with Heroku best. So that you're not using things like terminal commands so much, because when you look through things like this getting started guide, which is a great place to start, and I'm going to be starting here to kind of kick things off, but then I won't be staying with this document because I've gone through this, and some of the things they do here is that they're pretty command line heavy in the way that they describe and the way that you should go through these things. And I don't think that's totally necessary, because some of the ways that you can do these sorts of things doesn't involve using the command line. You can actually do it in other ways that are a little bit more declarative. So I want to show you what some of those are so that you're not stuck feeling like, you know, the entire way that you use Heroku is all command line based, because it doesn't have to be. It helps out, but the benefit of it is that it's really not all command line based, and there are a lot more different interfaces that you can use that don't involve kind of getting hung up on just a command line. So one of the things that I will be showing here is the basic getting started package for Python. I'm a big fan of Python. I've been using it almost as long as I've been using Salesforce, and it's, in my opinion, a very useful language, mostly because it touches so many different domains. You can use it to interact with IoT applications. So you can use it in an environment where you're interacting with a Raspberry Pi, or even you can use it to talk to Arduinos and pull down information from like even that level of edge technology from sensors. But you also can use it in other contexts such as science, data analysis. There's some great libraries for data manipulation, pandas, NumPy. All of these are libraries and add-on packages that you can add on to Python, and they really expand out what you can do with it. And last but not least, I think Python works really well as a web server when you use it in the instance of how it's used in this kind of getting started package. What Heroku gives you with this getting started package is really handy dandy introduction to using Django. They don't actually mention it that much here. That's, well, they say it here, I guess, but they don't spend much time talking about how this is a Django application. And when I realized that, I was like, holy cow, this is a lot more powerful than they make it out to be. Just being this quote unquote getting started thing, you actually have a lot of capabilities to kind of add on to it and start playing around and adding other things. And another thing I'd love to do if I have time here is to show the Django REST server, which I think is one of the best features about Django. It's a super easy way to spin up endpoints and make your own APIs. so that you can easily return values and kind of start that server side of working with REST APIs. So I think it's great from that aspect. Okay, so let me pull my how to do this instructions over to my other monitor. Okay, so we have the getting started walkthrough. I want to go to the next step here. So if you are kind of trying to walk along with this, I'm not going to try to do this in a way where we're like checking like, hey, are you following along? What we do want to do, we are recording this, so you'll be able to reference back to it. And additionally, if anybody has any questions, I'll give you my Twitter handle, and you can always just send me a DM and get linked in with me there. It's a great way to kind of keep in touch on this sorts of things. So if you ever have any questions, I'll be available there. But this first step of what they're talking about here is actually installing the Heroku command line, which is a big prerequisite for using this guide because they use it so much in this guide, as I was saying. I've already done this step, so I'm not going to do it. Just one note, if you're using a Mac, they're talking about Homebrew here. If you don't have Homebrew, I'd really recommend it. I know it sounds like very command liney, but honestly, getting Homebrew will make it so you don't have to use the command line so much in an interesting and ironic way, because it's a package manager. And Homebrew allows you to easily install things. So rather than like compiling and installing the Heroku CLI in some very complex way, you can use Homebrew. Also here, they just have a downloader, so you can use that too. Okay, so this actually is where I'm about to pick up. So I want to create a Heroku app. Did anybody have a question?
Yeah, can you actually present your screen? It's hard to see. Can you actually try doing the presenter mode, or?
Am I not presenting?
Yeah, we're not seeing your screen.
I think you might have to pin it. It's visible, I can see.
Yeah, I'm able to see it fine.
Yeah, you have to pin the presenter window, or else you're just going to see his talking window.
Or maybe could you share a window instead of share whole screen?
I could do that.
Okay,
Well, if I share a window, then I won't be able to switch back and forth between like browser and command line. And
it looks like they're able to see you now. So.
Okay.
Cool.
Do you want me to use my bigger monitor? I honestly feel like that would be worse.
Yeah, the bigger monitors make it worse.
Yeah, I would just keep with what you got going right here.
Probably keep going with what I got.
No, it was more of the pinning was the
okay,
issue.
Cool. So let me pull up my instructions again. So one of the things they do with these instructions is they actually have you creating a Heroku app after you download their repo thing here. I don't know if that's totally necessary. When I want to make an app, I just want to make an app, right? So one of the things I'm going to do is just go straight to my Heroku interface here. You can get to that by logging in at heroku.com. And that's why they say create an account there. You do need to create a Heroku account, but once you've created one, you're free to go to use free apps as much as you want. These are low-level apps that don't stay active. Heroku actually turns them off, but then they do leave your URL live on their load balancers. Which means that they know when somebody's trying to access your app, so they'll activate it for you, they'll boot it up for you and run it through the build process, allow people to use it, then when it stops getting usage, they power it down again. So the free tier is a way for them to offer you the way to use Heroku, which is awesome because you get the whole power of Heroku and basically free web servers, but you don't have to worry about paying for them. So, and you can develop easily with that and kind of get started. So I want to create a new app. I'm going to do it through the interface here, and I'm going to call it beginning to MKE. You choose a region. They have this pipeline feature. I will talk about those in a little bit. That's something that I consider a part of the 12-factor methodology. So I'm going to create my app. And so then they give you this interface here for your app. And they kick you off immediately to the deploy screen. There's a reason for that. And I'm going to get to that in just a little bit, mostly because you have the ability to use the Heroku CLI to deploy to this app. but there's a much better way to do it with GitHub here, and I want to show you that because I think it rocks. So I have initialized my app. Now I'm going to go over to download this source code like they asked me to do in the instructions here. Git clone, or I can also do this. I'm trying to minimize the amount of terminal I'm doing here. You can just go straight to the github.com/ and then you just go to the repo online. Word to the wise, when you're using GitHub, if you don't want to use commands to just download a repo because you just want to see what's in it and you want to look at it in your own IDE, you don't want to necessarily have to use all the, git command. What's the git command? Well, it's git clone, and they try to feed it to you here, and they did give it to you over here as well. But one of the things I just want to show you is you also have the ability just to download a zip right here, which makes it really easy. Like, you just, oh, there it is, and so now I have it in my downloads folder. So I've already downloaded it, as it turns out here, and so I have my folder here on my computer, Python getting started, and that's me. I did the git clone on it earlier, and so that's already local and hosted on my machine. The next step that you'd want to do, and what I kind of do in my flow, is once I have sort of a baseline repo that I want to start working off of, I consider these like stacks or images. I'm a really big fan of Docker right now. I've been using Docker a lot lately. I think Docker has a lot of features that are like very similar to Heroku, and using Heroku has really helped me appreciate how great Docker is. Also, Heroku supports Docker, just a shout out for that. The idea of building an image where you start with those dependencies that you've already sort of proven out and you've already worked on and you're done with those and you don't want to modify them anymore is extremely powerful. And Docker makes that really easy, but it's also kind of a good way just to develop when you're just in general kind of working on things. You generally have a, kind of a code base, a knowledge base, your own personal knowledge base of things that work, which means that you can draw from those and then expand upon them for future development. So you can take something that works, you've proven it out, and you can just tweak it a little bit. I call it breaking it. You just tweak it a little bit to see if you can get something working differently or better. And then you have that, and you can keep building on that. And then it becomes this cumulative process where you just keep growing things and keep getting them better. So what I want to do is just get started with just this basic package. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up my own repo locally here. And I'm going to call it Heroku MKE. And then I'm going to navigate in there. All right, now it's time for the command line. I can't get the next step done without that. Oh, yeah, actually I can. So I want to make a repo on GitHub now as well. So I'm going to go to my profile, and I'm going to make a repo here. I'm going to call this one beginning MKE. This one I'll make public so y'all can see it, and I'm going to initialize it with a README. That's a good way to just get your repo started with an initial commit, so you don't have to worry about your Git history, commit history not having any commits, which is actually weirdly complex and presents problems. So if you have an initial commit, it just gives you a commit history and it's easier to work with. Okay, so now it's time for Gabriel's quick and dirty Git training. If you don't know how to use Git, there are like 6 commands that you can get by if these are the only commands you know how to use. Git is hard to use if you're not using command line, and there are tools for it, but it also is unfortunate that even if you're using some sort of like graphical tool, you generally have to understand the concepts and the order in which the concepts happen in order for it to work. So it helps just to know what the command line is. And so this is my quick and dirty training on how to use Git through the command line and kind of the steps behind how Git works in this process. So I have created, this is the command line. I'm already in my root MKE dev group directory. And so what I want to do is show you Finder. Same concept. I went up a level. There's the MKE dev group. When I go ls, generally a great command to do, not that much, but gives you information about where you are in the file directory. You can see when I do an ls there, you've got beginning Heroku MKE, the folder I just made, the folder I made while I was preparing for this, and then that getting started repository that I downloaded earlier. So what I want to do is navigate into my beginning Heroku MKE folder. So I'm going to go in there. You do that with that change directory command. That's what cd stands for. And now, if I do my ls, harmless command that gives me more information, it has told me that nothing is in this directory yet, which is true, because if I go in here, nothing is in there. But I do want some things in here. I want Git to be in here. So first Git command, if you don't have Git in your folder yet, you do Git init. That's initialize an empty Git repository here. My next step, since I've already created my repo over here, I have a cloning command. This is the URL of the repo. And generally, GitHub makes it really easy for you here. They give you this way to link up to your remote repo. This is probably the most complex part of this whole process, because this command I've had to drill into my head so that I remember it. Git remote add origin. If you remember this command, you will be helped out so far along your ways of easing your pain using Git. When you're using GitHub, learning to master this command is super helpful, because you can always go to an empty directory, git init it, and then do a git remote add origin, paste this URL. Unfortunately, I have to do a slightly different step because I also have my work GitHub set up here. So I have to hack this thing in here. So this allowed me to go to my personal GitHub instead of the work one. So I have a git remote add origin on my remote repo, and that is added. And then you can pull down the branches and confirm that you are working by going git fetch. And then again, another step where I have a password for it. Okay. Now that has shown me that it's worked. It's given me the branches that are available to me. Right now, master is right here. It's the only branch I have available. And so it's told me that I'm on that branch. Okay, so how many commands am I at? 1, 2, 3. One more I'm going to use. Git checkout. Git checkout allows you to change branches. If I had a different branch, you'd be able to check out like a dev branch or some other branch. But I'm going to do git checkout master. I'm actually already on it, but I just wanted to show you that. Okay, so there's 3 more git commands that I get here, and I got to make it count. So what I'm going to do is give GitHub something to have, because you can see right here I only have a README, so I haven't gone very far. Driven. So why did I go straight to GitHub when I was giving a tutorial about Heroku? Great question. The reason why I went straight to GitHub is that Heroku enables you to not focus so much on building a server, but working first on your code base. So you noticed in a talk here ostensibly entirely about Heroku, I wasn't talking about the servers. The first thing I was talking about was not servers, it's how do I get code up on here? How do I build an application on here? That's the benefit of the platform as a service. You've moved straight from, I want a web service that does something, some website that's hosted somewhere that does something. You've skipped all of the infrastructure steps and you move directly to, how do I write the code for this thing that I want to build? So all of those steps have kind of been taken over and managed for you. That's one of the benefits of Heroku. That's why you go with a service like Heroku. So I don't have any code here yet. My application is soon going to be linked to this repo, but I don't actually have any code in this repo. Actually, one thing I do want to do for you here, Now that I have this repo ready to go, beginning Heroku MKE, I want to show you this part. So remember how earlier I said that it took me to the deploy screen and there was something valuable here? There is. There's this GitHub integration, which is awesome. So if you have this GitHub integration going, you can skip, they have all these, you know, dumb steps about how to git push Heroku master. You don't have to do that. Use the GitHub integration. It's way better. You can just do normal git commands and you can hook it up like it's a CI tool and it'll automatically detect that you've deployed to a branch in GitHub and rebuild your application for you. So it's super powerful in that way. It's like free CI. You don't have to do any sort of CI setup. It's automatically all built in here, which makes it really valuable. Even the Docker version of using Heroku has a tool like this, and it's one of the, in my opinion, the benefits of using Heroku Docker rather than like say an AWS Docker, because Heroku Docker gives you ways of still doing this like free continuous integration tooling where you can simply push to a repo in GitHub and all of a sudden your application is deploying. So it's super convenient in that respect. So you get this like handy dandy search. All you have to do is just beginning Heroku MKE. It finds my repo. I connect to it. You can see I can pick the branch. So I already showed you about how I only had one branch. You can actually hook up CI. So before you start deploying, you wait for your CI to pass. I don't have that, but I can do this. Enable automatic deploys. Now, if I push to the master branch, all of a sudden, boom, it's going to start deploying my app instantaneously, super fast. You move directly from writing code, and now I want it live, and I push it. All I do is just push it to GitHub, and all of a sudden, it's magic. So it's super powerful tooling. I'd highly recommend using this GitHub deployment method. It's great. One thing I just want to note here, if your deploy fails for some reason or you want to retry it, or I did this earlier, I didn't enable automatic deploys and then I still wanted to deploy it, there's a manual way of deploying here. So if you haven't just pushed or something, but you want to just re-push and redeploy from GitHub to Heroku, you can just go deploy branch right here and instant convert to your app. Okay, so I've set up automatic deploys. I've got my repo. I don't have my code in my repo yet. Okay, so I promised you my last 3 git commands here. Remember my first 3 were, maybe I'll try to, can I pop this text up? Can you guys see this? Okay, my 3, or did I cheat? 4 commands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I might be at 7 by the end of this. Uh-oh, I'm gonna be in trouble. Okay. LS, always recentering. I don't have my code in here yet. Next step. Okay, Python getting started. There's some things in here that I don't want. It automatically gives you this git stuff. I don't want any of that. I do want that. I do want that. Okay. So I'll just take some stuff out of here, put it in my repo. Gave me a second README file, but I don't want it. Now I'm going to deploy it. Git add dot. What does dot mean? That means the current directory that I'm in. So this command means use git to add files or folders where I've specified, and where I've specified is all in my current directory and all subdirectories. Okay, git add. Now I do my next command, git commit -m of Django. Okay, last git command, git push. These 3 commands, add it to a commit context, build a commit, give it a message, push any commits that you've had staged. And what this does is it pushes it to the remote that you set up earlier here. Get remote add origin. Gotta do my key again. All right, magic is happening. Because I set this to do automatic deployment, there should be some things happening over here. There we go. Okay, so it automatically detected that I pushed to GitHub because I set up that integration. Now it's building. The build phase is one of the things about the 12-factor app, and there's 3 phases that are important in that methodology: building, releasing, and running. And the idea behind Heroku is that they're all kind of compressed into the same thing, and you don't always know the difference. And it's trying to do these automatically for you. So your build progress here is really just something that is pretty complex to do when you're doing it kind of manually. Doing all of these things can be a little bit hairy, and honestly, when you're learning, it's almost best to just be doing each of these as their own command line commands. But if you think about it as like what Heroku is doing for you, honestly, each of these steps here is something that basically under other circumstances you would have had to do it manually as a command line entry, and instead of that, this is just doing it all for you. And it's building your application based on the specifications of what you've told it to build it as. Now, this Getting Started app has some of those things built into it automatically, and really sort of they're already there. And so one of the things that this is doing is it's building an app kind of based on predetermined specs, which again is one of the great things about Heroku, because if you have an app that is optimized for Heroku, you can find any Heroku repos out there on GitHub where somebody else has successfully built a Heroku app. You can download them and then deploy them as your own Heroku app because they're standard and in a standard format, because you've given those instructions to the system on how to build your server up in a very quick fashion. Does anybody have any questions thus far? Am I going too fast? Okay, I'm gonna again take silence as a good thing. Just make sure that I'm actually on here, not talking to nobody because nobody responded. Okay, so
This is great so far, Gabe. Thank you.
Cool. The build log here is filled with some cool things that are interesting to learn about. So how did it detect that I have a Python app? How did it know to start installing Python? What version of Python did it know to install? Why is it installing this thing called pip? What is SQLite 3? What is this requirements thing? I'm going to go into each of these later because each of these turns out to be pretty important in the whole life cycle of Heroku and what Heroku is. That too, a proc file is super important. The proc file is a big important part of that. This is telling you how big the slug is. Slugs are important, but I'm not really going to go so much into that. But one thing you see here at the bottom, it says that it's deployed an app for me. Here's a benefit of Heroku. It does all of the URL stuff for you while you're in development. And even you could, go to some sort of, quasi-production sense. I've seen people fire up these, .Heroku app things and then just send them off to people like, here, I made this service. It's on Heroku, and it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's kind of a free domain for you to use. It's not, if totally all that, professional. You may want to try to wrap it in a CNAME domain or something if you want to, really, it'd be easy to do that, to give a custom domain to yourself based off this. It's already done this is huge. It's already done SSL for you. That in and of itself has saved you a ton of time. It's already HTTPS. So it's given you an HTTPS cert. One benefit of it, it's not self-signed, so it's fully CIA capable. So if you have any tools like Salesforce, like Apex, where if you're trying to mock out an API and you try to use some sort of tool that doesn't automatically give you an HTTPS server, a secure server with an SSL certificate attached to it, Apex won't work with it. You won't be able to make call outs to it. So I've had that happen to me trying to just, tool up simple Linux instances on AWS EC2. You don't get, unless you use tools like Docker, you don't get that HTTPS automatically. And so you have to start building in some of those tools on your own side. So having it already built in saves you a ton of time. And so it's one of those benefits of spinning things up on Heroku. So this is a URL. I can go to it. It has something behind it, I promise. And there it is. Here is this getting started with Python on Heroku. And just to show you that I'm not pulling the wool over your eyes, one of the things that I want to do is start hacking this. So I've got this is the wrong one. Open. This is the right one. I'm gonna put that over here. So I'll try to blow this one up too. Okay. This is my Django server, and it has some things called templates on it, and I'll show you where this text is. Getting started. With Team MKE. Save it, redeploy it, git add dot. Oops, spelled it wrong. Git commit and change message on page. Push. Remember password. Now it's redeploying all the way, all of a sudden. Okay, I showed you how to do the deploy logs, which are visible over here. And by the way, it's doing it again soon, actually. Should be doing it again. Soon it will do it again. In the meantime, there it is. I have something else I want to show you. Okay, so one quick command I'm going to fire in here that I highly recommend that you learn when you're in the world of Heroku from the command line. You're going to want to be able to see the logs. You're going to want to be able to see the logs really quickly and easily, which means that this, I'm going to paste it in here, command is super valuable. Heroku get :remote -a beginning Heroku MKE. The reason why I want that command, and I'm going to copy it out and show you the impact of me not having that command active right now. I'm in this directory of my repo beginning Heroku MKE. I'll show you. Here's that getting, these are all the same as over here. Getting started, manage.py, proc file, app.json, hello, requirements.txt. They're all over here. This is the same folder. So I'm in my repo for this app, and it's distinct to this app. So in my opinion, I should get contextual commands in my command line that work for that app. Well, if I do Heroku Logs --tail, one of the most valuable Heroku command you could ever learn, although, again, there's actually also a declarative way to view it over here, view logs. But I like viewing these over in terminal. And so this Heroku Logs --tail, oh, it's bothering me. I don't have an app indicated. Well, that's, bring this command to the rescue. This command saves you from having to indicate what your app is every single time that you run a Heroku command, which means that setting it early on in a certain directory saves you a ton of time down the road. So if I do Heroku get -a beginning Heroku MKE, all of a sudden it tells the system, if I'm in this folder, know that I'm using this app. This Heroku app, beginning Heroku MKE. Now, if I run that same command, Heroku Logs --tail, I'm going to enter it out because it's so valuable for you to know. Heroku Logs --tail. Enter. Boom. All of a sudden, I'm viewing these logs. Now, these are cool because if you leave them running while you use your app, they do stuff. Or not in that instance. There you go. See what it did? I reloaded the page, so refreshed. Oh, there's somebody using it. Refresh. So it tells you, the router is actually telling you that, and that's actually Heroku's load balancer. Their router is their layer on top that takes these HTTP requests to the URLs that they very nicely and conveniently give you, and then it routes them along to your server. In this instance, the web server was super easy to set up because I got a version of how to set it up for Django really easily handed to me from, also Django is really good about making that pretty easy as well, interacting with web servers, but Heroku also makes it really easy. And so there's some things about this repo that has made it really easy to fire up a web server here, and all of a sudden it's live and taking commands for me online, and I have, you know, pretty granular fine level control over what I can monitor and see it doing on here. I can even set up some Python scripts on here and just run them and see the log from the Python script. I can send print commands to it and it'll just start printing commands for me. So that makes it really valuable. Okay, so what are some of my next steps here? I showed you my get remote -a. I showed you the live app. There's getting started with Team MKE. I made a quick change, and all of a sudden this wasn't all just this kind of fake environment where they gave me here. They've also given you some next steps, so that's nice. Okay, I've shown you the logs. Add-ons, fun times. Add-ons. Okay, so Salesforce has an app exchange, right? It works great. You go to it, you search for apps. It's a library of apps. It could have been called the App Store, but Mark Benioff decided to sell it to Steve Jobs for $1. So that's cool. It's called the App Exchange. Heroku kind of has their own app exchange, and it's called Add-Ons. Right about now is a great time to show you this Heroku interface if you've been wanting to see it and I've been hiding it from you this whole time. What's going on in this whole kind of view of Heroku here? Well, it gives you this log and it's telling you all of the different releases and versions that you're giving it. Heroku is nice because it versions things automatically for you as you deploy them. You can actually roll back to an old release really easily and just quickly put it back in an older version. That's all built into this platform. It saves all of those for you. It's also telling me what sorts of things it did for me. So it attached a database, so an add-on. And that's one thing I'll be telling you in a little bit. It also configured an environment variable for me. The way that Heroku does environment variables is super valuable because they're all easy to configure on here, in the interface here. So this is kind of like your first dashboard overview. It tells you what add-ons you have. Okay, so now let's go to add-ons. What are add-ons? It's also the resources tab. The resources tab is telling you what is the structure of your web application. So what kind of servers did they give you? But also what kind of add-ons did you get? And add-ons are great because they make it really easy to boot up databases. So I can do like Redis. Say I want to have Redis on here. This Heroku Redis is like one of my favorite features of Heroku because it is Redis and maybe I don't have a credit card. Okay, so I can't install Redis, but that's how you would do it if you wanted to install Redis. I'd highly recommend Heroku Redis for those of you looking for going to the next step of things, because Redis enables you to have this kind of glue, this caching layer between all of these different dynos that you have. Dynos is the Heroku word for kind of a unit of computing power. And so let me show you this. So this is actually how, mostly actually it's for how they charge you, but also it's for system specifications. So it gives you kind of an idea of how much computing power you're going to get. in kind of an easy to understand and use and kind of understand way of doing things. If you look at AWS's version of this page, it's a nightmare. I'm just going to show it to you. AWS pricing tiers. Let me show you how many different options you have. EC2 pricing. This is great. Let's see. On demand. How many different tiers do they give you? Okay, well, whoa, geez, all of a sudden this got out of control. Super granular, right? You can get to like very granular level of exactly what you need, but look how long this is. Like, this is a nightmare. How would you know what you wanted to use other than kind of knowing exactly your specifications? It keeps going. It doesn't stop. Heroku has, instead of all of this, it gives you, 4 choices here, which makes it a lot easier to choose. And honestly, it gives you kind of a better feeling of like it's out of your control. Like Heroku has it handled. You don't have to worry about it. Heroku does it for you. That's the kind of the peace of mind you get out of using Heroku, is that you don't have to make all of these infrastructure choices. It just makes them for you. Any questions about that? Cool. Okay, so that's dynos. Dynos are computing units. They also give you add-ons. Highly recommend Heroku Redis. Why do I have Heroku Postgres already here? Well, that is because I have this getting started package, which Heroku made for me, which was already pre-configured with some things. What is this app.json? App.json is a Heroku construct, and it kind of gives Heroku some instructions on how to build an application. And so it has a name, a description, kind of an image associated to it, some keywords, and then this. This is why it added Postgres for me automatically, because I already had this configured here. So this was pre-configured. And so when I deployed this, the system read it and was like, oh, this person wants a Postgres database. Let me add that add-on for them automatically. I didn't have to have this line here. I could have just gone and added a Postgres server here. You can actually click into them. And there's one very convenient thing that Heroku, Redis, and Postgres give you is they give you the access code to the environment that they fire up for you really easily. So you go to the settings here, view credentials, boom. All of a sudden, all of the information that you would ever need to access your Postgres database is right here. This is so easy that I've used this to just quickly fire up a Postgres database that I want to have available to me, not used by Heroku. So I've spun up a Postgres add-on on a Heroku app just so I could quickly spin up an EC2, like an AWS Postgres quickly and without hassle, because it's that easy. You just add the add-on and then all of a sudden, boom, all of the permissions you need to access it are right here. Here's your Postgres URL. This is valuable to us because of the next thing I want to talk about, environment variables. It's not a good idea, nor do I have these here, to put, refresh, your environment variables directly into your repo. There's a reason why this .env file that I have over here didn't come along. It's because it was automatically in the gitignore file. We didn't want to deploy it, so I put it in the gitignore file, and the system didn't deploy it. So the environment file here now works locally on my machine to tell the system what are some of the secret things about the application. This is a great place to put secret information, much like the root level access to your Postgres server is definitely something where you would want to put it behind some level of safety. So where do you put this URI? Let me show you. Go to your settings tab in your Heroku app. There's this reveal config vars. This is your environment variables. The system actually already conveniently set this one for me because it spun up an add-on, but it set up this database URL config variable. And so this is telling the system within the build and release contexts and the run contexts of Heroku how to interact with the Postgres database. And it does this behind these walls of environment variables so that I don't have to have them in the repo. I can have them in the context of the app itself. And so that actually is one of the 12-factor app methodologies. Maybe I should just honestly jump over there right now because this is so important. What is a 12-factor app? Actually, as it turns out, anybody have any questions?
Yeah, there's some questions in the chat feed there.
Oh, dang. I didn't know they were coming into the chat. Let me go look.
Yeah.
Cool. I stepped away for a few minutes. Okay. I can't see any screen. We fixed that, I think. Okay, so Melissa says, I ran the Posal quiz app with the standard dynos for 124 people and left it on for 24 hours and it amounted to 5 cents and they waived the charge. That's pretty cool. So you didn't have any issues with any sort of big charges there?
No charge at all. I was extremely surprised, and quite frankly, if I have a group that big again, I'll up the dyno size because I can spend 50 cents. You know?
Yeah, right. I mean, like, if you notice this, as far as the dyno size over here, like, what was it, $5 a month or something? Like, that's even to go up to a little bit of a better tier hobby than the free one, where they'll like leave it on for you. $7. That's not that bad at all.
Yeah, so I had some trouble with 124 people. I jumped up because Salesforce said that they were willing to reimburse us for the quiz app and that the Heroku dynos. And so I jumped up, and I should have gone further up because with 124 people and that app and everybody hitting it at the same time, I still had some delays. And I noticed that Kevin Poorman in his developer quizzes has been having a similar problem, and he should probably be doing the same thing, but I haven't reached out to him. So
okay. Nice. Yeah. Can you do the same thing with SQL Server? Do you mean like Microsoft SQL Server?
We're going to be spinning up for our backup a new AWS, and that a repository on AWS. I don't know what the right technical term is for it, but basically a place to put our backups on AWS. And if Heroku can do that so quickly by just saying, hey, create one, and creating all the connections you need so quickly, and you can transfer it like you were talking about, I think it would help our team and cut out a lot of time.
The big one for me was Redis because until I found Docker, and that made Redis really easy. But Redis, I didn't really have a handle on it until I started using Heroku Redis, and it was so easy. Like, I just added the add-on, and then all of a sudden it was active and working. And they give you configurability around it. They give you great monitoring tools for it. So, yeah, the add-ons are probably my favorite part. The data pricing it's not cheap. You can actually get it cheaper through other services. Like the Postgres to go to any significant amount of rows. Like, I've maxed out the hobby rows. It's like 10K rows pretty easily on an app where you're kind of doing some decent sized loading of data. So you can run up against those limits if you don't start paying for kind of a more like, I don't think it starts getting good until like the $50 range per month.
Maybe I confused my two comments. My comment about the pricing for Heroku and the dynos was strictly for Heroku and the dynos and running that one app, and that it's not necessarily as expensive as you'd expect. My next two comments about I want to use that for AWS and is it available for SQL Server? You made it seem like when you spun up your, was it Redis? No, Postgres. When you spun up your Postgres on Heroku, that it set it up and it gave you all the configuration settings, and then you were able to use those outside of Heroku.
Oh, you sure can. Yeah. If I
Okay.
did something like
So that's what I was
PG admin
asking.
here.
That's
Yeah,
what I was asking
this
if
is a
you
great
could
app.
do with SQL.
Honestly, if anyone wants to know a great Postgres admin app, download this PG admin thing. PG admin is free. And let me see how quickly I could hook up to this Heroku app, Postgres with it.
So my team internally that does connections between all of our different things wants to and would prefer to use SQL Server. So I
Yeah.
was asking if you could do something similar to what you had done with Heroku and Postgres, and spinning it up that quickly and getting all the settings and
You
then
sure
using
could.
them
Yeah.
outside.
There's this MS SQL backend. I think that's what you mean by SQL Server, Microsoft SQL Server.
Yeah, that looks like the icon
And
for it.
this is another add-on. There's tons of add-ons out here. There's a whole library of them here. A lot, like I said, it looks a lot like the App Exchange. Here's a good one. Paper Trail saves your logs, so you could have all these logs running, but it saves them for you, so you can go look at them and rewind and look at certain logs at a certain date. That's a great app. Mailgun's a good one if you want to set up emailing out of your app.
So basically, you're saying that any of these apps that if you want to set them up and use them outside of Heroku, you can set them up inside Heroku in minutes, and then use those same security settings to outside of Heroku.
You can. It's not necessarily like the best practice, but it's just kind of a cheat code that I like using every now and then. It's not something where I would, I guess it would work for you if you really wanted to use the Heroku services. You wouldn't have to necessarily plug them into your app. You could kind of have them reside in the add-ons of an app, but use them elsewhere. I guess is an option. One thing I'll note here, the MS SQL one appeared to just be firing up an MS SQL service on Azure, which may be honestly cheaper if you just went straight there. But okay, so I've got these addresses here. Let's see how long it might take me to plug all this in. Add new server, name, MKE, dev, servers, connection, address, 432. Don't need it. User. Password. Or it was already the same. Save the password. Boom. See if it works. No. Database Postgres. That's not the one I wanted. What if I give it this one? Huh. It worked. So now I can just start exploring the database here. Theoretically. Well, I might have correct. Oh, there it is. So here's an interesting fact about this. Apparently, you get to see a lot more details about about this than just, this is shared infrastructure. So I think it's highly likely it's showing me information about other people's Postgres servers. Not a ton of specific details about them, and I don't know how far in here I could get. I'm sure Heroku is trying to be secure about this, but I would I would put a high likelihood of this is details about somebody's Postgres server, somebody else's Postgres server, just kind of metadata about them because it's shared infrastructure. Some interesting facts about what you can do with those login pieces of information. That showed me more details here than I honestly thought I would show you, so you're welcome. Okay, so I have the add-on done there in that piece. What's another step I want to go through? Oh, I was talking about the 12-factor apps. Let me kind of hop back over there. Okay, so see, just check quick if there's any other questions. Okay, nope. The 12-factor app, time check, 7:20. The 12-factor app is a methodology for building software as a service. And so it's kind of something, honestly, a lot of the people that helped come up with the 12-factor app were the founders of Heroku, which is one of the reasons why the 12-factor app has its own section. If you take the Heroku certification test, there's kind of two big things I'd recommend studying up on: the common runtime versus the private runtime, and the 12-factor app. There's a ton of questions about the common versus private runtime, and there's a ton of concepts that are used by the 12-factor app. So by studying those two kind of areas, you end up getting a lot of questions as far as what they ask about on that test. But so kind of the idea behind the 12-factor app is almost more of like a Salesforce way of building a web app. You know, there's kind of a free-for-all way of building web apps where you could just, you know, kind of have the bare metal server and then you configure things in kind of one by one. But the idea behind the 12-factor app is a lot like what I've already indicated Heroku is about. It's about building a source-driven application that you're building the code, not worried so much about the infrastructure. The application should be able to be portable and run anywhere. So the 12-factor app is very much along the lines of portability and can be deployed in the cloud. That has everything to do with it. So it's kind of a departure from a lot of the ways that people thought about web applications when it was more on-premise, where that was a lot more kind of popular and prevalent. With the enablement of cloud technologies and really the portability of where all these services give you the ability to do things, the 12-factor app is a way of building an application that is really highly configurable and usable all over the place. One note that I will put out here for this is a Salesforce meetup and a Salesforce group. Big plug for Salesforce DX and Scratch orgs. Scratch orgs are, in my mind, the embodiment of the 12-factor app on Salesforce, all until they come out with Evergreen, where that will become the next big embodiment of the 12-factor app. But for now, the big embodiment of it is a Scratch org. If you think about your Salesforce development lifecycle in a way where you're maximizing the portability of your builds, and you're not like in, I call it like sandbox quagmire, where you're like stuck in a sandbox and, like, oh, I know it works only in this one sandbox and I want to like deploy it to prod. If you think about your applications with a level of maximum portability and your thought instantly comes from, okay, I've got this working, to how do I deploy this somewhere? If you instantly move from, okay, I've got it working, to how do I deploy this somewhere, you're thinking with a mindset of, I don't want this to reside here forever. I want to think about how I can pick this up and put it out somewhere. So I consider Scratch orgs, because they force you with a limited amount of time to develop in that time frame and use version control to push it in and out while you're building that application. Scratch orgs are the pure embodiment of that, because it means you have a deadline. That org is going to go away. You have to figure out how to deploy it somewhere. So you might as well start as soon as you can. What are the 12 factors? Okay, so code base, one code base tracked in version control. We already talked about that. I went straight to GitHub when starting a presentation about Heroku. Dependencies, I haven't talked about this one so much. This one is an extension of what I was talking about earlier. So I had that URI, right? Oh, now I lost it. That URI was over here in Postgres, but it was also over here in my settings, config vars. And there's this config variable database URL. Well, it turns out that Python Django has a way that you can plug these environment variables in very easily, and so you can set Django to interpret itself as interacting with a Postgres database. One of the great things about Django as a Python library is that it enables you to really rapidly get a layer of abstraction around your database. So you're not doing raw SQL calls straight to your database. You're building in more of an object-oriented fashion right from the beginning. And so what you do to enable that is you're actually taking this settings file, which is located in what I call the project root directory, or the kind of main project directory. There's always this sort of like one directory where you have your settings file and your URL file and your WSGI file. You always see those there. And each of these do distinct things. Remember how I told you that it was really easy to fire up a web server with Django and with Heroku together? Well, there are two ways that this web server is working. There's this WSGI file, where we're using some Python commands to and Django as well, to automatically create a WSGI application. WSGI, all you really need to know about it for the purposes of this is I don't even know what it stands for. If somebody on the phone knows, please tell me. But it's really just for creating a web server. You always hear it in web server contexts. You hear WSGI together with Apache, Unicorn, all of those things together. It's just talking about a web server. The WS, I'm sure, stands for that. Maybe like graphical interface. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Anyways, so that you got the WSGI, the URLs file is a big Django thing. I hope we have time to talk about it because it's an awesome way to make URLs. You just say, I have a URL here. I want you to, put something up here for, and it automatically makes the link for you to that URL. And then the settings file where you set up some of this stuff. Now, if you're doing it wrong, you could set your, and believe you me, I've done this before, so I'm guilty as anybody. But you do want to not put environment variables right in the settings file, even though it doesn't seem to lend itself to that, because you're putting them straight into GitHub. The settings file is up here, in here. So you're revealing those variables if you put them there. But if you do something else, I got to copy my code for it. If you do something else, you don't have to do that. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm doing a Python import here. I'm going to import in this library called DJ database URL. I already have this line, so I don't need that one. And then I have this database's default line. Where am I going to put this? Okay, so Django Settings always has a section where they talk about your database. And right now, it's automatically setting it to an SQLite 3 environment. What I want to do is override it. So it's first did that. I'm going to change it to be what I want it to be, which is use Postgres. And I'm using Postgres because I'm using this DJ database URL Python package. And it's an automatically quick way to use this database URL environment variable. Remember how I had that over here? Database URL. If it's named exactly this in the key for the variable, this tool is going to go pull it out and use it as the configuration point for the database. But I'm not totally ready yet with this settings file. I'm going to save it, but I'm importing in something here. But am I guaranteed to have this library available in my environment? One of the great things about Heroku is that it's ephemeral. So that's actually one of the other things in the 12-factor methodology. And it's one of the things that surprised me the most about Heroku, coming from a world where I had been building EC2 servers and just kind of getting SSH on and, getting a command line in there to the AWS server. I love working with Linux servers and the command line on Linux. So I'd be going in on EC2 and like building up an app there just by using command line on it. And I'd kind of have this app that I had built up and spent so much time building. It's very much the same thing as like, well, I spent so much time in the Salesforce sandbox and all the stuff works there. How could I ever move somewhere else? Well, if you think about things with a disposable mindset, it forces you into a way of building that is honestly much better, because you're going to be able to really quickly tear things down and build them back up. And so instead of doing things like having a server where I already had installed this library on here, it rebuilds it each time it builds the server. It actually gives you a whole new environment and oftentimes a different IP address. So if you have any tools that like can require a consistent and static IP address, Heroku is honestly not the best tool for that, because it doesn't have that great of tooling around making sure you always get a consistent IP each time, at least as far as my knowledge is concerned. So how do I get this DJ database URL library in here? Well, I can go here. This is another part of the 12-factor app. If I'm looking here, dependencies, you explicitly declare and isolate dependencies. You're doing that in the Python context of Heroku here in this requirements.txt file. Now, if you'll remember, when we were looking at the deployment over here, let me just show you one of our deployment logs. Build log. One of the first things it did, Python app detected, cached dependencies out the door, install your language, and then this one right here. What is it doing? What is pip? Pip is a lot like, if some folks are not so much Python people and more like Node.js people, pip is the equivalent of Node Package Manager or NPM. It's also kind of analogous to things like Homebrew. Remember when I was talking about Homebrew later, it's a package manager. It's a package manager for Python, which means that it holds this great assortment of all of these libraries that do all of these incredible things. And it's easy to install them because all you have to do is make a requirements.txt file. And all you have to do in that requirements.txt file is like, I want you to add this dependency for me. So I want you to add DJ database URL. And how can you know if something is in the pip library? Well, I don't know how to say it, pipi, something like that. This is the indication of, if you want to find out what's in pip, you go to this website, pipi.org. There's tons of stuff in here. See here, they have the direct pip install command. If you do a requirements file, it installs all of the requirements you have in the file. So this is why the system knew to install Django. This is why the system knew to download the web server, Unicorn. This is how the system knew to add this Django Heroku package, which makes it easy for Django to integrate with Heroku. And now I am modifying it one step further by adding in this DJ database URL tool, which makes it really easy to configure a Postgres database made with Heroku in one line of code, as I did right here. So now I can deploy this, and it will add my new dependency. So let me exit out of this. This is a Control-C, by the way. If you want to kind of get rid of a running application in command line, just do a Control-C, and it'll close that out for you. ls, where am I? Okay. Let's see, I made some changes, and I'm still in the root directory, so git add dot git commit m. Added in DJ database URL. Push. Let's see what it does now while it's building. View build progress. Python app detected. Installing pip. See how it's installing it again? It's like it boots it up from ground zero each time. That's one of the great things about Heroku. You're not relying on what it was the last time you did this. It's completely new and independent the next time. There's my new package. See how I pulled it in? So I told it in the dependencies file, requirements.txt, that I wanted to pull in a different file, a different library, and it's doing it automatically for me. The reason why it's Python is because it detected a Python app. The reason why it did that is because it saw a requirements.txt file. I think that's all that it does. And this runtime also is an indication that this is intended to be a Python app, because I'm setting the Python version here. So requirements.txt, runtime.txt, strong indicators I'm working with a Python app. And so Heroku knows how to interpret that as a Python app. But what if I didn't just want to run Python? Well, I can do that too. Gotta remember where it is. Build packs. Where's my build packs? Maybe it's in settings. There we go. Okay. Say, and this was part of the, I'm really not going to have time for this, but the Lightning Web Components demonstration, when and if I get to show you that, entails adding a new build pack. And what you do is you add the Node.js build pack. I'm just going to do it now so I can show you what it does, which isn't that much. And it's probably honestly going to get kind of mad at me because I won't have the Node version of a requirements.txt file, which is the package.json file you might be familiar with from Node. That's how you add the dependencies for Node. So it's looking for these different dependency files depending on the kind of framework that you're using. As you saw here, there's a lot of different languages that Heroku comes pre-built with. I know that the Java one I've used before on Heroku, that uses Maven. Obviously, that's Node. Python uses Django. It works really well with it. You can use other ones, but those are kind of the common ones. And there's all these other ones that I don't know that much about, frankly. I used to have a phase where I was using PHP, but that is long gone now. And so, yeah. Any questions? I'm going to check the question log. No new questions. Cool. It looks like I've kept some people, but some people have dropped off. I just looked at the participants again. So thanks for sticking on the line, everybody. I appreciate you sticking it out with me here. So let's see. Jake, do you have anything you'd want to put in here? I do have plenty of other things. I could talk this whole time about this, and I do want to, I do have some other things to show here.
I have nothing else on the agenda, so if people want you to continue to have fun and watch, I'm all for it. So I would ask the rest of the audience what they're looking for here in this.
I'm truly excited by everything I'm seeing, and enjoying you rambling about it thoroughly.
That's great to hear. Yeah, that's my style.
I agree with that. This has been really informative. Thank you. I think one question I have, I don't know, maybe I missed it in the intro. I guess what is, obviously you're very experienced with Heroku to be able to teach it to us. But what kind of uses are you using it for professionally in your projects? Are you connecting it to force.com for anything, or what kind of use cases are you seeing?
Yeah. So I use this Python environment quite a bit, and one of the things that's great about it is that you do have this ability to add other libraries really easily. And so some of the libraries I like working with are requests. Python has a really great module for making REST callouts called requests that is really easy to use and really powerful. And so it's a great way just to mock up sample clients for APIs. But just kind of to your question, what are some of the professional use cases that are most valuable? The library, there's a library out there for Heroku Salesforce Bulk. This is awesome. This Python library is a fully featured data loader for Salesforce. And you can use it to load with the bulk API of Salesforce from CSVs. You can manipulate the data in Python, so you can pull the data down to a server, manipulate it, push it back. Because you have tools like requests, you can also integrate with other services. So you can use the bulk API to pull from Salesforce, manipulate data, pull in other data from other sources, push it back to Salesforce. Its capacity as a middleware is extremely powerful, especially if you need middleware that is a little bit more customized than something like a MuleSoft or a Dell Boomi. You can use Heroku as middleware that can do a lot of different things and come with its own custom environment and monitoring system. So you can build your own UI to your own data loader, basically, is one of the things that I think is one of the best features as it comes with regards to Salesforce. My mind went instantly to this because this is, honestly, it's the only way I know how to interact with the bulk API, and it's probably the only one I'll ever need to know how to use because it's so easy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
One other trivia point I happen to know because of how long I've worked with CPQ. I don't know if anybody else has worked with Salesforce CPQ, but the document engine is actually a third-party proprietary app on Heroku that Salesforce calls out to, sends the quote data, renders the PDF, and sends it back. So it's kind of silently does that. You wouldn't know that's happening unless
it does that with the
package yourself.
too. As I've learned through some painful experiences using the CPQ API, the Apex API, and trying to integrate that with a Lightning Web Component front end. The CPQ API, we were having trouble with the Apex version of it, so we tried to use the REST API version of it, which is really intended for, honestly, kind of like a Heroku implementation. You would have a Heroku website, and you'd call into those Salesforce CPQ endpoints for retrieving pricing. So you could build a Heroku app that could interact with CPQ in that way by calling out to Salesforce to retrieve pricing and then pull that into the Heroku app. That would definitely be something you could do. But I was trying to experiment with using that REST API from Apex. So I was trying to call that API from Apex back into Salesforce, so directly into itself. And it didn't work. And the reason why was because it told me that it was trying to tunnel the Apex. And so it didn't like the tunneled call out nature of it, which revealed to me the fact that it was trying to do a second call out within the managed package, which makes sense because there's just like a natural latency to that pricing call out that generally takes, kind of a minimum 4.5 seconds to run.
Chris, are you talking about Output Builder for CPQ? We have had CPQ since it's SteelBrick. We got it in 2014 and have it highly customized with Apex for our pricing. And one of the initiatives our company is approaching in the near future is changing over to the new pricing configurator tool, because we're on the old one. And Output Builder for quotes is just a royal pain in the ass. I have not been able to get someone who can answer if there is some sort of newer version that works better and can be modified more.
So
do either of you have anything to say
Yeah,
about
the answer
that?
to that is, if you're talking Salesforce native, the answer is no. The doc engine is the doc engine. And yeah, and like I said, this dates back to the Steelbrick days. It's basically the same product, and I forget the name of the app. But there's some third-party app that is, like I said, accepting that data from Force on Heroku and sending it back as a PDF. But honestly, for most of the enterprise clients I work with, most of them already have Conga Composer, and there's some Conga packages out there that make it easier to link Conga to CPQ for document generation, and that's what a lot of them are using. They also even include, I think, with some of the higher license types and the billing package, like if you were to have billing, the invoice generation package is Conga. There is no native invoice generation package. So yeah, I mean, that's generally what I see people doing, is when they exceed the capabilities of that document engine, which, by the way, does have the ability to create custom content in the form of Visual Force with an Apex controller in XSL FO format, but it's very, very complicated and not well documented. If you don't want to do that, or you exceed the declarative capabilities, most people just go to Conga or Nintex or some other tool like that for doc output.
So you're saying that there is an invoice generation paid component that has Conga Composer in it?
There's a whole right before Steelbrick got acquired, Steelbrick bought a company called Invoice It, and that became Steelbrick Billing. And then Salesforce bought the whole thing, and now it's Salesforce CPQ and Salesforce Billing. So there's a whole other product. It's actually larger and more complex than CPQ, that handles billing, invoice, payments, RevRec, the whole 9 yards. And so, yeah, if you generate your invoices through that tool, the doc gen piece of it is Conga.
Okay, we had Financial Force for our billing and stuff, because I'm guessing that they didn't have Steelbrick billing at that point in time. But thank you for the highlight there.
Yeah, no problem. And Financial Force is a little, Financial Force does some billing, and billing doesn't do any of the PSA stuff that Financial Force does. I don't know what all modules you have with it, but yeah, they're a little bit different. But yeah, the billing tool, that's been a part of the Salesforce portfolio since the Steelbrick acquisition, so beginning of 16. But it's been it's not been marketed very widely because they've been re-architecting it, and it's good for very specific use cases. It takes a very concerted effort to get it up and running at this point.
Yeah. We had Steelbrick and Financial Force since 2014, so that's probably why we don't have the Steelbrick billing. Sorry to run a sideline again. No. I apologize.
Yeah,
Thank
but yeah, we do CPQ as well, or I've done it, and we've done some of the Apex with the standard document generation tool out of CPQ, and in my opinion, it can get the job done, but some of the documents that people request or need, the tool just can't handle those types of requests, and Conga Composer is a better tool for that. There are certain versions of CPQ that do come with Conga Composer,
right?
So as a
yeah, I would just in general just put a big plug for doing document generation using a tool like Conga integrated with CPQ. Just from a technical angle, the document generation appears to be stuck at like a bit of an older version of HTML.
Yes.
If you're writing those quotes out, you're doing a lot of things like tables and blocks, and that's almost all you get. So yeah.
Yeah, I've spent many hours making those. Whereas if they bought Composer, you could have it done in an hour or two. So.
Okay, so while I still I'm gonna keep talking about Heroku because I love it so much. The one thing that I didn't get to that's hugely important when you're talking about Heroku, and what you're always going to have in a Heroku repo call it a Herokuized repo, you're going to have this proc file. What does that mean? Process file is what it stands for. And what you're telling the system is run these commands when your server starts up. This is actually a command to start a web server. And so you can see that it's saying go to gettingstarted.wsgi. Well, where'd that come from? It came because Django generated that file for us. And it's booting up using Gunicorn, which we already installed, the web server, so that we can receive those requests and serve up those web pages that we were looking at earlier. There are other types of processes. This is the one thing I want to impart, and I don't want to go too, obviously I only have 11 minutes, but one of the big next steps to working with Heroku is learning how to understand how you can expand out on this proc file. You can do things like a worker instance. And with workers, you can add on tools like with Django or Python specifically, you can add Celery. And that's why I was talking about Redis earlier. Celery enables a method of scaling out workers that receive and subscribe to instructions sent by the web's processes. And so these processes can be asynchronous processes that reside on a different application layer, and you actually specify different applications around them. So I don't want to have a complex worker. I don't have anything set up to do it. But what I am going to set up is a worker that really doesn't do all that much. It lists the contents of its directory. I already showed you that ls command earlier. These are commands that you could just plug straight into your command line, and it should be able to understand them. So these are command line tools. Like an event, sort of, you know, you could, it's not really events, but like this, the system won't like this command because I don't think I have Gunicorn installed, but yeah, see it said Gunicorn not found, but this is actually a command line. It's a bash command line instruction. So it's as if I would have entered it in the command line on that server as soon as Heroku built it for me. Heroku is just automatically running this line in the command line for me. And so if I do this ls, or better yet, like make dir Gabe, do it all lowercase actually. And then I do another command, ls. What it's going to do is make a directory if it finds that it has permissions. I hope it does. And then it's going to list the directory outside of where I created that directory. Okay, so if I set that in the proc file, and I do a redeploy here, change to proc file. I just gave away the first letter of my password. Okay, so let's see here. One thing I need to do to make that work is show you over here. Eventually, it's going to recognize that I told it to spin up another process. It's going to show it to me here. But right now, I need to wait for this to kind of process through the works a little bit. Uh-oh. Oh, okay. Yeah, it got mad because I added that. I knew it would break it. I added the Node.js build pack, and then I didn't give it a package.json like I predicted it might do to me. So I am going to make use of that manual deploy option. Okay, so one thing I need to do is remove that build pack. Remove. And manually redeploy it. But I just did that all without command line, right? It's pretty handy.
Cool.
And so eventually it's going to detect that I told it to do a worker dyno, and I can scale up those worker dynos. It's not detecting that just yet. Anyway, incidentally, if you want to scale up, when you're using professional, maybe this isn't, maybe it's because it's a free dyno. But normally when you're working with Heroku, at least in the paid version of it that I'm a little bit more familiar with, you get the ability to scale up right here. So you can, from this interface on this resources tab, say I want 3 dynos for my web processes. So you have more computing capacity available to you. You pay more, but you get more computing capacity available to you, and it scales up really quickly.
Yeah, if you don't have a credit card on file, it won't allow you to do that, even if it never charges your credit card.
Yep. Okay, so I set up this worker now. Let me see. Okay, and so by the way, these commands that, see how this is exactly the same as in the proc file? It's reading it out of the proc file for me. What it's doing here is these are the instructions that it tells it to run as soon as, and so the results of it actually dumps to the logs here. As soon as this is done, this release piece here, and see how it's build succeeded and all that. The web dyno took over and it started going, oh, I'm shutting down. And then this right here, starting Goonicorn. That is a result of the system calling this command line thing. So it dumped the results of that. That was the first thing it did when the server started up. That's what the proc file does. And so it starts booting up things based on the instructions that you give it in the proc file. And what I did is I made this sort of just dummy script just to be like, you know, that this isn't really what you'd want a worker to be doing. You'd want it to be able to pick up and subscribe to things from the web or the web dynos. What I did is just give it some cheap and easy to do so I can show you what it does. And what it's actually doing is it's creating a directory, Gabe Rocks, there it is. And then it's listing the contents of the Heroku server. So it's going through and it's saying, oh, okay, here's what directory I'm in. And this looks very familiar to us, right? Because it's the exact same as what we did over here. Getting started, hello, manage.py. There's the proc file again, the README, the requirements, all that fun stuff. And so that's just an idea. And so it's giving me that worker as a different dyno, but connected to the same app. Again, processes, part of the 12-factor app, super powerful, big part of Heroku. Really powerful.
Any idea why it changed from started up to crashed in your logs?
It crashed up where? Up
twice. There and down.
Yeah. It crashed because I didn't give it anything really real to do. So normally what you would be doing in your proc file here at this point is setting up something similar to, like what this is it's a service that's running. It's a process that runs continuously. When you set up a web server, it's running as a service and it doesn't stop because you want it to keep serving up websites when people are asking it to. Normally what you do with your worker process, like when you're using something like Celery, and again, I highly recommend Celery as sort of like the next step if you're curious and like trying to replicate this and then move on to some other next steps. A great next step with Python is making things run asynchronously, which means you're going to be in the land of using worker dynos here on Heroku. And so one of the things you'd be doing is you'd give it a command more like, an example for you. Oh no, this one. Oh no, this one does have it. If I look in the Docker Compose. Yeah. This right here. This is one you'd more often see, Celery worker -- app, where you tell it where to start looking at Celery, and this is another service. And so this Celery service says, create me a worker application that is subscribing to read asynchronous events. So this, you asked me like events, this is more like events. This is where you would set up a system to do like an event processing bus where you tell the system like, hey, I want you to run this task for me. And Celery runs asynchronously on other dynos, so not on your web dyno. So you can off-source those processes and all of that kind of higher processing power intensive stuff so that it's not clogging up your web receptors. And it's running on a level of the server where it's okay if it just runs for a really long time and you can just sit there, you know, kind of taking up computing power with it.
Okay, so if that's the event bus that's reading events, how do you receive them? Or
So
is that too deep for this?
yeah, the web dyno is kind of receiving those requests from the open web. And one of the things you can do is set up, like if you used another big up, one of the next big steps you do after this is set up the Django REST server. This, right? Hold on, one moment. Did I not install it in this one? Oh, weird. Well, this one has it, I'm sure. Yep, this one. That is awesome. Django REST framework enables you to really easily build REST endpoints, so you can build your own API really easily and really quickly. So that's a great dependency to pull in when you're using Python and the Django, because it enables you to build APIs. So one thing you could do is build an API that receives commands. So you could ping a command to it, be like, run this process for me. And what you can do when you're using Celery is on your web endpoints, you can receive the commands from the web endpoint, and you can just code a little quick bit of Python to call Celery to be like, hey, Celery, here I have a task I want you to run. Here's some parameters to it. Go run this task for me. What that does is it uses that Redis middle layer as a caching layer, where you can save the instruction of the system. It is an event bus. You're saying, I want you to eventually run this task for me. Here, Redis, store it, hold it for me until the worker's ready to go pick it up. And the workers are subscribing to that Redis cache. And so they go pick up those tasks out of it, run the logic. You still code it in Python. You code it within the same context of all your other stuff in your repo here. It runs the logic for you. And if you use something like Channels, which is also great, Django Channels enables you to push the results of your workers while they're running back up to the web. And so you can kind of have really a two-way process between your synchronous and asynchronous processes, where they're kind of like interacting in real time. So almost like the asynchronous isn't so asynchronous, which is really cool.
Yes, it does. It sounds really, really cool.
Yeah, this is where you're going up to the next level. Like, this is where you're truly enabling the scalability of Heroku, because when you do things like this, when you really understand what processes are doing for you, and all of a sudden, all you have to do is just go to this web interface to just start ticking them up and giving yourself more computing power. All of a sudden, you're doing things like you can scale up your asynchronous processes that run on your other layers of your application. You can also scale up your web dynos, so you can be able to receive more instructions from the web and process more on that first level of defense. So you really have two layers of configurability then, of scalability for your application. So you get a lot more levels of control over that. So yeah.
We're about to implement a new version of SAP. We're taking over from the mothership, basically.
Okay.
We've had an SAP implementation, but we've never been able to control it. And with our new joint venture in the last 2 years, we're finally able to take over our controls from the mothership. And sorry for referring to it as the mothership, but
yeah.
Being in such a large company, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US LLC, we are only one part of a large organization, and since we can take over now, we've never been able to integrate SAP with Salesforce because Mitsubishi is a defense contractor in Japan, so they've never let us put our hands directly into SAP. So we're looking to integrate our order processing in our order department, I guess is the easiest way to refer to it, and have it relate directly to Salesforce and have real-time updates on orders being shipped and stuff. So this is the deepest I've ever seen anyone get into actually doing it. I've talked to people about it before, but I've never actually seen code that would do it. So this is super cool. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. Great to hear.
Sorry if I'm boring anyone else.
No, no, not at all.
Nope. I was just saying it's 8 o'clock here, so I was thinking about we could wrap up here. I do have a question for everyone here. If you'd be interested in doing like a Heroku workshop next month. We have one where we go over kind of the stuff that Gabe talked about here with. We can talk about Heroku pipelines, streamline GitHub, CI, continuous process, that type of thing. Or we can also go with we're using Salesforce Connect and Heroku Connect to connect to your Salesforce or to your Heroku instance, and you can have them talk back and forth. Would that be something that people would be interested in next month?
I would.
I would. I am trying to soak up as much information as I can from any group that is meeting at a time convenient for me, wherever they are in the world, as long as they speak English.
Sure, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I think next month we'll probably pick one of those. There's 2 different workshops, about half an hour, and then maybe have Gabe talk some more on his passion of Heroku.
Yeah, like I'm saying, the next big step in this stack that is, I think, a really big development that, especially as it pertains to Salesforce, is that I was able to get Lightning Web Components interacting via the Django REST framework to those Python servers. So it was actually a very familiar for Salesforce developers front end, so they could just develop it in the tools that they're already familiar with, writing Lightning Web Components. But what they're interacting with on the back end is not necessarily Apex. They actually have a Python server serving up that to them. And they have all of the capabilities of what you can do on a Linux server or a Python server, or actually with these build packs, you can tack on anything you want. I've previously tacked on to a Python server the Js'build Pack because prediction.io, it's an AI package, runs on Java. And so I've shared together those on the same instance where I've had the Python server act as the API layer, and then it transitions those commands off to that it receives off to the back end. It tells the Java layer, hey, I want you to go run, train a model for me. So there's super cool stuff you can do when you start kind of mixing and matching build packs and seeing what they can do together, and combining together the Python build pack with the Node.js build pack means that you have the ability to combine together those Lightning Web Components that are now open source and off platform into your Heroku applications, which is awesome.
Wow. I'm super interested in that. And you have definitely piqued my interest in Python.
Cool. All right.
Would you mind if I gave a shameless plug?
Not at all.
The Atlanta Developers Group, and I should be creating this event. I should have been creating this event this evening as opposed to listen to this, but you guys were way too interesting to jump off. I'm the only leader. So I am having an event on the 28th of this month at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time, with featuring Alyssa Abbey, the VP of Customer Communications for Elements Cloud, and also Andrew Davis, the author of Mastering Salesforce DevOps, speaking about, I'm sorry, I should have prepared this.
Capado?
It's Capado, yes.
Yeah.
But with Andrews actually speaking on creating your sales teams, not your sales teams. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. I will provide more information, but they're going to be giving certification, Capado certification discount code at the end of the presentation. So it's a combination of Elements Cloud and Capado and the implementation lifecycle. So if anybody's interested, watch out for that. Atlanta, Georgia Developers Group. That's where you'll find it. And I'll be posting it on the Quip document. I'm not sure how many people are aware of that, but it will be posted there as soon as I can get my act together to get it out there. So
Nice. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, and feel free to hit me up as well, and I can help spread the word as well.
excellent. Do you guys have Twitter handles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said you were going to post them, but I
Here.
haven't seen anything.
I was bad and I didn't do a beginning presentation today because I'm dealing with my two-year-old daughter all day. So.
Oh, well, that's okay. And it's okay that you got on a few minutes late. I'm sorry that I wound up being the person having to accept people. I didn't mean to do that to you.
Would rather have somebody let people in.
Somebody was here.
Okay. Oh, Chris, I think I've got yours. Aren't we on that chatter group, or not chatter group? The
private group. Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know where you planned on putting it. So just for completeness sake.
Yep, absolutely. You guys may, if you recognize me on Twitter, you'll recognize me as Astro Loves Cody.
Nice.
Oh, that's where I've seen your name before then.
Yep.
Okay. Cool.
Well, I have copied. Oh, wait. Dark Knight. Yes, I got Dark Knight. Jody's. Okay. I've got all 4 of your Twitter's handles here. I'll make sure I'm following you guys. And I will be sharing. Let me see. Wait a second. Where's my phone here? The dev group, the Atlanta dev group Twitter handle. Hang on just a second. ATL Salesforce DG. I will post it here. ATL Salesforce DG. Just so you know, when I post from my phone, I cannot tell whether I'm posting as myself or the Atlanta Salesforce developers group. So if either of those,
just follow both of them, right?
What?
Follow
both of them.
I've given up on our developer group's Twitter handle. I use it just in reference, but it becomes too hard to manage.
I don't.
Yeah.
I lost the password. You gave it to me once, and I never plugged it in. So.
I took over the Atlanta dev group from David Todd, who worked for Map Anything in the Atlanta area and started the group 7 years ago. And because Map Anything got acquired, he had to get somebody to take over the group. He could no longer run it. So I took it over last September.
Yeah, that's how I got a hold of this group. It was the same type of scenario.
Oh, so we have something in common.
I was just trying to help out, and then they said, "Here you go, you can have the keys." And I was like, "But I don't want the keys at the time." So, but I still have them. So, and going on 3 years now with Gabe and I running it, so we've kept it afloat.
Oh, go ahead.
I just said that Gabe and I have kept it afloat with not really know what we're doing initially. So.
Yeah, it was
virtual meetups have been a lot of fun and a great way to kind of get to know new people. And honestly, we've had more attendance with these virtual meetups than we've had with some of our live ones. So it's really cool to see.
Yeah, and I think going forth, I think we might be doing a combination of live and virtual.
Yep.
Yeah, I definitely agree. The live events are fun, but they're a lot of work. I took the lead on we did a combined global gathering for all of the Atlanta area groups in January, and we had 124 people show up in person, which was wonderful. But oh my God, the stress and dealing with all the group leaders and we have a brand new group who's barely doing anything. And so it's been an interesting year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Alrighty. Well, I need to head off because I hear my daughter calling my name.
yep. No, I don't mean to keep anyone.
Alrighty. Take
Nice
care.
meeting you. Have a great
Nice
night.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Appreciate you.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.
Have a good night, everyone.